and welcome to another episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. I'm Mike Evans.
And I'm David Price.
And today, I'm smiling, David, what are we going to be doing?
It's the Creek CAS 4040.
One of my all-time favourite amplifiers.
Yeah.
And actually...
Quite a legend.
A total and utter legend, yes, yeah. Launched Mike Creek's career, I think it's fair in saying that, isn't it?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, from hi-fi retail back in, where are we, sort of late 80s, then it was just an absolute 1 in a million giant killer. And it had this fantastic musical, powerful, beautiful sounding qualities, all in a very, very inexpensive price tag.
Yeah, it was a very charming sounding amp, I think, wasn't it?
It really was.
Yeah.
And we've got one. We've got one here, and I'm very pleased to have this. And look at this. This is one of the very, very originals. We can tell that because, well, a couple of things. It doesn't have green writing on it, because the later ones turned green. Mike Creek obviously way ahead of his time on the eco-friendly status. We've got all these lovely input buttons. And we've got tone controls.
I know, controversial.
And then this amazing form factor at the back, because it's actually, even though it's such a narrow amplifier, you can sort of see how narrow it is anyway. It's massively recessed as well. So if it wasn't for the heat sinks, it could be sort of 2.5 inches less deep again.
It was a very small amp, wasn't it? And much smaller than the NAD 3020.
Oh my god, that was a proper, a mammoth thing in comparison. And look, it's got these. Look, we have to put these little adapters in because we've got DIN plugs in the back.
That's right. So this is really hardcore first generation. So the very first 4040s were sold in 1982.
Wow.
So Mike Creek told me that the very first one was sold on the 31st of March 1982.
Gosh.
And when you were selling them in retail, it was in the mid-late 80s, I guess.
It was. And mine were the green ones, actually. We didn't sell the very original ones, but I've heard these plenty of times. And in fact, Mike didn't really need to tweak the sound too much for the Series 2 because it sounded so brilliant on the Series 1. So there's some really interesting stories behind this, because if you think about sort of that time period particularly, and especially maybe in terms of British hi-fi, there were some fantastic amplifiers available. So the de rigueur amps were things like the Arcam Alpha. The NAD obviously was kind of right up there. New Acoustic Dimensions of 3020. That had been around for a little bit. We've done a review on that before. And then it was really interesting because there were some more amplifiers which were actually more expensive. Oh, the other one in the budget end was a Rotel, which was the 820.
Yeah, it's the RA820BX, probably.
Which was a great amp, actually. But the thing about the Creek, it was a bit of a giant killer. So back in the day, everybody would say to you, you need to do the A/B dem. So get your amplifier which you think you want to buy, and then compare it against everything else. So people would normally come in and want to think they want to buy the Arcam. And we'd sort of say, look, just to be fair, you need to listen to the Creek as well, and then listen to the Creek. And then they suddenly realised that actually the Creek sounded better than things like the Audiolab 8000, which was Flavour of the Month. Mission Cirrus 2 sounded better than, there was kind of A&R Cambridge, P60s and things like that. It was a better amplifier than all of them.
Well, that's right. Well, the A60 A&R Cambridge, wasn't it? Or Arcam by the 90s. Was almost twice the price of the CAS 4040, wasn't it?
Yes,
but I don't think it sounded as good.
No, it didn't. There's no two ways about it. It didn't. The Creek was brilliant. Why? Because it was powerful. It was musical. It really kicked. It really rocked. It was just is. We've just listened to it, and it still sounds as well as I remember it. It's still as good as I remember it. And these are cheap on eBay now. In fact, I think I was saying to you earlier. So a pal of mine managed to pick up one of the green-fronted ones, the Series 2 4040, for I think £80 on eBay. And I mean, what a great amp! He uses it with a pair of Q Acoustics, which again we've reviewed the Q Acoustics. Sounds absolutely stunningly good. It really does. So, but look, it also caused a problem because when you came to upgrade it, you actually had to spend quite a lot of money. And in fact, I think probably there was only one integrated for me which sounded considerably better, and that was the Exposure 10.
Yeah.
Which, as you know, is an amp which I really rate, and I think
I didn't know that, Mike.
If we can get a,
you should start talking about it a bit more, because we haven't heard you mention it before.
Isn't it funny though? Because I've never owned one, because I bought the Nate one instead.
Oh, did you? I didn't know that either.
But actually, I do really rate the Exposure, and I'm going to completely ignore you here. But we should get an Exposure because it, it's a fantastic amp. So that was a genuine upgrade from the Creek. That was a better amplifier than the Creek. But actually, you needed to go pre-power after the Creek. Yeah. So you would have had to have bought something like a Name, kind of 32, 90.
Yep.
Or maybe an Exposure 6, 7, and 8 sort of combination to actually get a significant upgrade.
Which should be 3 times the price at least.
3 times the price.
Yeah.
But it begs the question, doesn't it? And we were touching on this earlier. In their golden era, in the Creek golden era of this, the 4040, the 4140, the Series 2s, etc. They never did a pre-power.
No,
Mike never did a pre-power.
Absolutely. And for me, that was the weird thing, because Mike made a problem for himself by making the 4040 so good that you had to spend quite a lot of money to get anything noticeably better. And when you did spend quite a lot of money, you'd be into the pre-power stuff, as you say. Yes. And Mike, at that time, certainly in the early 80s, late 80s, didn't have any offerings in that, did he?
No.
So it's
he didn't have a clear upgrade path.
Yeah. So that's not a problem that Name or Lynn ever had, is it?
No, not at all.
And he didn't have a kind of like the Mission Cyruses had the PSX power supply and all that kind of stuff.
True.
So it's just like, here's my amp, it's great, buy it, and then keep it until you can afford something considerably more expensive, not made by me.
But it's really funny you should say that, because we were, I think the industry then, and it probably still is to a greater or lesser extent, was very much source driven.
Yeah.
So we sold loads of systems which were LP12, a Keto, which had just come out at that time, replacing the LVX.
Yeah.
Lin K9 cartridge with the Creek, with this lovely Creek, particularly the green one, the 4040 and the 4140s.
Yeah.
And then you'd sell them with like a £99 pair of loudspeakers, like the Royd A7s. And actually, then what's your upgrade path? And people were then coming back in, and instead of upgrading the amp, they'd buy an ITOC.
Yeah.
So you'd have LP12 ITOC K9, and then when the Lingo came out, you'd have LP12 Lingo ITOC K9 with your little Creek amplifier and a pair of £100 Royd loudspeakers. But it was a really funky upgrade path.
Well, we were sort of discussing this earlier, that in a way the 4040 was a kind of enabler for people to buy LP12s in lower to mid price systems.
Yes.
Because basically you could buy this for basically 100 or 150, 250 quid, depending on which era you were talking about. But it was so good that you could just kind of fit it and forget it. Like, I've got a great amp, I've got a really decent pair of speakers, and cheap like Royds or something. And now I'm going to splurge large amounts of money in Ivor Tiefenbrun's direction.
Well, you said earlier, and I think you made a great point, which is Ivor should be extremely grateful to Mike Creek for enabling him to sell an awful lot more LP12s.
Yeah.
But certainly that was, if you had that kind of budget, I don't know what we were talking about, maybe 1,500 quid back then, you could heavily load your front end because this amp was so good.
Yeah.
And in fact, to be fair, the little Royd speakers were cracking as well.
Yeah.
And we'd probably say to people, buy a pair of Lin Can speaker stands, even though they're the same price as the Royds, and some, decent cable.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, for around that price range, you had a brilliant system.
Yeah.
You really did.
Well, I wonder if Mike Creek was on Ivor's Christmas card list. He should have been.
He really should have been. He really should have been.
The interesting thing is, when Ivor had a go at budget amps, was it the Intec he did?
Yes.
It wasn't quite budget, but it was mid-price, wasn't it? So it would have been roughly twice the price of the 4040, and it wasn't as good, was it?
No, people would come in and have a listen to it, and maybe even bring their original 4040s in, and okay, it may have been a slightly better amp, but it wasn't worth the money for the upgrade. In fact, the next path was inevitably pre-power. Just as we just talked about. So that was the thing. So look, Mike's still on the scene.
Yeah.
Still a really lovely guy. And one of the things which we were saying about him is he's always had a great ear.
Yeah.
So, he knows what good sounds like, and I have tremendous respect for him for that.
He does. Everything he's done has always sounded good, I think.
Yes.
Yes. And that's no accident, because if you look at the history, the prehistory of the 4040, Mike kind of did everything in hi-fi before he got to start Creek Audio.
Right.
So he worked, and not a lot of people know this. Is that a Michael Caine quote? I don't know. I won't do the accent.
No, please.
So thank you. But he worked, so he tells me, for Alan Sugar, a geezer called Alan Sugar.
Holy moly.
At Ambit International, which was Alan Sugar's vehicle at that time, pre, all the Amstrad computers and stuff that he did in the 80s.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and
I did not know that.
He also worked for his dad at the
Alan Sugar's dad?
No. So quiet at the back, please, Mike. So I'm trying to tell the story here. So it was the Windsor Recording Company, and that was Mike Creek's dad's company, and Windsor made some very nice tape recorders in the 1970s, 60s and 70s, I think. And Mike had done all the kind of gopher roles in that, kind of ordering parts and production and stuff like that. So he really knew his onions when he went to start Creek Audio.
Wow.
And Creek Audio, I think, was started in 81, and as we say, the first 4040 was 82, and the 4040 was based on, so Mike tells me, circuitry from some Windsor products of the 70s.
Gosh.
But it was he said he told me that the 4040 was based on an upgraded version of the power amp circuit in a Windsor design, and it just used a beefed up output stage using sort of Darlington power transistors, I think made by Philips.
Sure.
So it was kind of it was already, the circuit existed, and Mike tweaked it and put it into that little box.
Amazing.
Basically.
Amazing.
But he was telling me again that he didn't want to do an NAD 3020.
No.
So
that makes sense, because it's not.
Exactly, it's not, and it sounds quite different to the NAD. The NAD we both love and we think is fantastic. But it was great to have at that time in the 80s the choice between the Creek and the NAD, wasn't it?
It really was.
And
it really was.
You could choose whichever you wanted, and the NAD sold through hi-fi markets. I don't know if you remember that kind of
I do.
Distributor chain.
I do.
And obviously Mike was selling his stuff through the UK specialist independents.
Yes. Yeah.
So all of the kind of Graham's Hi-Fi and all of that kind of thing, I think, would have, the little specialist dealers in the 80s that we used to love.
Yeah, and because of that, I think his real competition was probably something like the MIST TMA3, which again we've done a riff on, the Nitec CA252 calculator amp, which again we both love.
Yeah.
So I think that was his.
Yeah.
But they were much more expensive.
They were. They were at least twice and often 3 times the price.
Yes.
So he told me, he didn't want to do a NAD by another name. He said, I want to do something that's unique, and that's what the 4040 was.
Yes.
And he said it was a unique design for the time, in a case that was far slimmer than usual. And
sure.
It is. It's got a massive overhang, as you showed earlier at the back. It could have been a kind of substantially smaller if he'd wanted it to be.
So the other thing which I just wanted to mention really quickly, because talking about him having a good pair of ears, he did a brilliant tuner as well.
Yeah.
And if you can get hold of the Creek tuner which matched this amp, it's a beautiful tuner.
Yeah.
And
was that the T40? I think it might have been the T40.
Yes, yeah. They used to say as long as you had a great aerial, that was what it really needed. But it worked fantastically well, and I've heard it singing. I really have. And in fact, what can I say? I think there were 3 tuners worth buying in that era.
Yeah.
The Creek was the entry level.
Yeah.
And then you had the Sony 77ES.
Yeah. 770
ES. and then you had the other names, but that was stratospherically expensive.
Super expensive.
It was.
But the Sony was late 80s, wasn't it?
Yes.
So in the early 80s, the T40 was pretty exceptional. You could buy the matching T40 tuner for that, and it really did sound fantastic.
It was amazing.
But didn't it have the signal strength was shown by the brightness of the display, I think.
Yes.
So if you couldn't see your display, you basically had no signal. You needed to plug it into a better aerial.
Fantastic.
But it was an absolutely kind of minimalist, super minimalist tuner.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and really nice sounding, and crazily good for the money, wasn't it?
So $1 million question then. So what's Mike Creek doing now? Where are you now, Mike Creek? Well, I think we've kind of got the answer to that.
We have,
haven't we? Because
so I can
very exciting. This is
exclusively reveal.
This is a world. Is this a world preview?
This is at the moment.
At the moment, no one's ever seen this before.
This is meet the new CAS 4040.
There it is. Look at that. It's just a beautiful thing. Absolutely glorious.
Yeah.
Just as tiny as the previous.
It's very dinky.
And interesting here. So there's some technology in the back which you can see. There's a little antenna there for Bluetooth.
Yep.
It's got coaxial input, and also it's got USB input as well as an analog input.
Yep.
So it's got a DAC built in.
Yep.
We don't have a huge amount of spec on this at the moment, do we?
No.
Because it's it's the only one.
Yeah.
It is it. This is it.
This is actually a pre-production example.
Yes.
But it's I'm assured that all of the insides are basically as the production one will be.
Sure.
There's just a few little bits, but we've been listening to this. And,
Class D.
And this is the interesting thing. It is Class D, and a lot of our viewers will be going, "Oh my God,
yes,
not another one."
I know. I know what's happened.
Yeah, but it sounds really quite
fabulous,
good, doesn't it?
Yeah, really good.
Yeah.
Really good amplifier,
and it
belies its size, doesn't it?
It really does. So it's not just another kind of Class D amp. It doesn't even use our kind of favourite current modules, which are the Hypex N-cores. I'm told it uses a completely different type of Class D.
Knowing Mike Creek, no doubt about it.
I don't think it's been used in any other product, commercial product so far.
Sure.
And it's surprisingly good. I'd say.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
Yeah.
So, and you see, for me, and look, you're gonna admonish me here, but it ticks my boxes, doesn't it? Because I can use my phone as a source. I can plug it in through the USB. I've got a million songs in my pocket, and this little amplifier rocks with it.
Yeah.
And it's got enough power to drive pretty much any speakers you want.
Yeah.
Without going crazy. I mean, you're not going to put £10,000, B&W speakers in or something.
No.
But it would work brilliantly with, again, some of the speakers we've reviewed. On Riff. From the Q Acoustics, for example, onwards.
Yeah.
So we're kind of getting back to basics. So instead of the LP12 as our source, we've got a phone as a source.
Well, you have,
which we own anyway. And then you've got this amazing little amplifier, and with plenty of power to drive whatever you want.
Yeah.
But I think, again, going back to what I said a couple of times, Mike's got great ears. This is a great sounding amp.
Yeah, it really is.
So,
this is a provisional price that it's not decided yet, but it's going to be around £750. Might be a tiny bit more, but
he's done it again, hasn't he?
Well, I mean, I think it's roughly the same price as that, but 25 years later.
Yeah. And this was a giant killer, wasn't it?
Yeah. So he's kind of gone straight into the same market. It's got, I think, over 40 watts of power. It's I've been using this in my system, driving my NS1000Ms for the last week or two.
Don't try this at home.
Yeah, and it's done surprisingly well.
That's I mean, that speaks volumes. I mean, your NS1000s are incredibly hard to drive.
Yes, and I had a DCS Bartok, which is I think about 15,000 quid, driving my super high-end Sony kind of pre-Esprit pre-power into my NS1000s. Then I went to this using the coaxial input.
You cracked me up.
And
there's lots of people that be buying that system.
Well, it's I can exclusively reveal it's not as good as the new Bartok 2.0, but it is it's really quite listenable. And the interesting thing again is that is. It has the same kind of giant killing thing, doesn't it?
Yes,
so you could be using a high-end system and then put that one on, and you'd be very happy with what you
absolutely.
heard. Yeah,
and I think, going back to what we said, if you had a 4040, you didn't buy an Audiolab 8000 after that. You didn't buy the Mission. You went straight to pre-power. I think this is going to be something similar, isn't it?
Well, the main difference, and we did do some listening comparisons. So we love the original because it's got a very musical, quite warm and romantic sound, hasn't it?
Yes.
It's very musically articulate. It really kind of gets you into the event that is the music.
It does, and it's really dynamic.
Yeah,
it's got loads of power.
Surprisingly dynamic for the power output. And it's not the most kind of detailed and sort of transparent thing. I think that's fair to say. But you don't miss what you don't have with that. It's really, really nice.
Yeah.
This is a more modern sounding thing, as you would expect.
Yes.
It's got more power, it's got more detail, I would say it's more spacious sounding, possibly less romantic, it's not quite as...
quite the warmth.
Doesn't quite have the charm
of the original one. But it's such a beautiful amplifier.
Yeah, but in no way would you call this bland or kind of typical Class D type stuff. It's really quite very nice to live with, very musical.
And I think also what we're saying here is, look, this is the first look you're going to get at this. As we go to press here today. But we're going to come back and do a proper review, aren't we? We'll have a chat with Mike. We'll find out a lot more about it, and we'll do a proper review of it, and we'll keep you all updated. But
absolutely.
You heard it here first, as they say, and we heard it an hour ago, and it sounds amazing. So excellent. And on that note, on that very musical note,
on that bombshell, let's give the original 4040 a riff score, shall we?
Oh God!
We'll reserve our modern one for later.
Yeah, great idea. So look, how do you not give it a 10? I mean, seriously, for the amount of kit you get for the money here, it's got to be, hasn't it?
Well, I'm going to give it. Mike, you're going to give it a 10. I'm going to give it a 9.5 because I had the NAD. So
fair enough.
I love the NAD, but I also love that, by the way. And I think that's more musical than the NAD.
Yes, it is.
And the NAD is more gutsy and more sort of powerful, I think. Well, arguably.
I think because this enabled me to make Ivor very wealthy.
Yes.
Then I'm going to give it a 10.
Okay.
We like Ivor, and I don't mind either being wealthy.
Yeah.
He's given me years of pleasure with his turntables and kits.
There you go.
And of course his Saras and his isobarics and all the other stuff which
I have. Yeah, all the other Lin stuff you've got. More than most Lin retailers.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
There we are. I'm excited about doing a proper review on that,
Absolutely.
and I hope you guys are too. So there we go. Thank you so much for watching this very special episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff, and of course we will see you at the next one. Thanks a million. Bye-bye.
Bye.